Hello. Seeing as there's only a few days left before the last listening exam of the old spec, I thought it would be a good idea now to do a video on one of the aspects of the exam that causes the most confusion and anxiety, and that's the big question, the 8-mark question that always appears in the exam. Since 2010, we've had one of these questions every time. They've delighted students and teachers alike with their ranges of interesting styles and massive range of answers in the mark schemes as well. It always keeps us on our toes. So, what I'd like to do is to give a few simple tips that will hopefully help you gain some extra crucial marks in this question. Tip 1 is always read the question. Now, what I mean by that is there is clues in the question, really important clues that will give you an idea of the kind of thing you should be writing. For instance, is it a comparison question where you have to look at the similarities and differences between two pieces of music, or is it a comment question where you just have to identify things that are happening in the music? How many of the areas of study does it want you to actually look at? Because it might give you quite a big choice of areas of study, but it may say you only need to look at 2 or 3 of them. That's a good clue. It means you don't have to write about everything. And how are the marks on the question divided? If there's 2 different extracts, there might be different marks for each extract. If it's 3 marks for a question, you only need to put down 3 points. The same for 5 marks. You put down 5 points. Tip 2 is always read the question again. What did you miss? There's always something that panicking, you go past it and you miss it completely. It might be a good idea to underline some of the things that you need to remember. For instance, comparison, comment, or how many areas of study. Tip 3 is, in your answer, use headings. Now, in 2010, when they first started asking this question, the mark scheme was just long lists of bullet points. But then, from 2012, they started using headings in the mark scheme, I assume to make it easier for examiners to mark. And that then happened every year since then. So, if they're using headings to divide up the answers, so should you. For example, in here, the 2014 is a comment question, and they're asking you to comment on at least 2 of 4 areas of study. So it's probably a good idea, perhaps even before you hear the music, to put in some headings. Let's say rhythm, harmony, and melody, if you feel confident about answering those. With the question in 2012, it was a comparison question, and you have to take a slightly different approach with a comparison question. My advice is to have 2 headings at the top, similarities and differences, with a line going down the middle. Then you still need to choose your areas of study. So let's say we're going to try rhythm, meter, and dynamics. Now let's say that you can't find anything about dynamics to write. That's fine. You might want to cross out dynamics, but I think just having those titles there helps you structure your thinking when it comes to answering. That leads us into tip 4, which is, in your answer, use bullet points. Now, I've seen students tie themselves up in knots trying to write full sentences because they see all those lines there and they think it's time to get into full text answers. But if we have a look at the mark scheme, it's essentially a series of bullet points. So don't get into long-winded answers. Choose your point, make your point as a bullet. Tip 5, probably the most important, always apply the right vocab. Now, I would hope that you've spent most or some of 2 years now looking at the right terms to use for each area of study, and I haven't got time to go through all of them now. It would be far too long. But in the interests of trying to help you get some extra marks, I have identified some crucial phrases that you should learn up on to take into the exam, because they are quite likely to get you some marks. So let's go through them pretty quickly now. Rhythm. Is the rhythm syncopated? Does it have an offbeat to it or complex rhythms in it? Syncopation is a big mark winner. Is it swung? So if it's jazzy or bluesy, if it's got dotted crotchets, it's a swung rhythm. Rubato, stretched time. So are there sections of the music that kind of slow down and then go back into time? Is the pulse of the music regular or irregular? Can you easily tap along to it? If you can, it's regular. You could mention something like in the melody there's a mixture of long and short notes, but it is important to say that you're talking about the melody or you won't get the mark. Meter, simple. It's either going to be 4/4, 3/4 or 6/8. Tempo. There's only 3 tempo terms you really need: slow, medium and fast. For the Italian here, adagio, andante and allegro. It might speed up or slow down, so it might have a rallentando where the music slows down at the end, or speeds up, accelerando. Dynamics. There's 3 things for dynamics, and I should recommend that you use the words generally or identify that it starts and then becomes one of these 3. Piano, which is quiet, soft. Mezzo forte, medium loud. Forte, loud. There are other terms, but those 3 will cover you. Melody. Again, you can talk about how the melody is organised. Are there long phrases, short phrases, or a mixture of those 2? Is there use of sequence or imitation in the melody? Does the melody move stepwise, where the notes are next to each other, diatonically, triadic, so they move up in a chord shape, or chromatic, where it will move through lots of notes, white and black notes, close together? Harmony. Can you identify a chord sequence that is mostly major, mostly minor, or a mixture of major and minor? Can you identify any cadences, the 2 most likely, perfect and imperfect? So if the music comes to a nice end, and it feels like it's gone back to the 1 chord, it's a perfect cadence. If it leaves you hanging, it's probably an imperfect cadence. Does it have a use of a pedal or a drone, which would be a long note that doesn't really change going on underneath? Texture. I recommend that you would use homophonic or melody and accompaniment. These are the most likely ones to be in there. Form and structure. Now, here you could just describe what the music is doing, what happens. So you could say a long piano intro followed by a melodic sequence. So just describe how that music has been arranged. If you're feeling brave, and really if you're only confident with it, you could start referring to sections as letters: AABB, AABA. If the A section is repeated but slightly different at the end, they'd want you to use a little number. So A1, B, A2, C. Do this if you're confident, is my advice. Now a quick word on timbre, which would most likely come up in this question as the use of instruments. Do not just identify the instruments. You have to say what the instruments are and what they are doing. So this is where you would use your playing techniques. Here's some examples. Strings, pizzicato, plucked. Con arco, where it's bowed, long notes. Trumpet or trombone, you might hear tonguing. Yes, I know, tonguing is very fast notes on the trumpet. Or con sordino, which is where these instruments are played with a mute. Drums, you might have drum fills if there's a drum kit, or you might have accents in the snare drum. Woodwind, you might hear fluttering, so trills, or like the fluttering of a bird's wings, as I like to say to my students. You might also want to say that the instruments support the melody, so if someone's singing and the instruments are playing the melody along with the singing, you could say the flutes support the melody, for example, or you could say the trumpets have call and response with the vocals if someone sings and then there's an answering phrase in an instrument. Okay, well, there's a lot more that we could put into this, but I just wanted a fairly short, compact video. 2 final thoughts. the mark scheme always says any other valid point. So if you put down something and it is musically relevant to the areas of study, there is a possibility that you will get an extra mark, even if it doesn't appear in the mark scheme, which is why you need to know your vocab. And finally, always read the question. Good luck, everyone, and thanks for listening.